I'm Magua, Panuai Washington, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Passover. Barakatha Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Ashered, Nathan Lanawe, HaPasach, Bashalawam, the water, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the Passover in peace. Thank you. So be it. The Al Yamah Shirai Makhad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Aimya Oh Harim Mayan Yabawa Zarya Yabawa Mayahu Shai Shad Shemayim Waratazela Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yela Wam Shashwa Marka Hanela Wam Wala Yashan Shashwamar Yashvalib Yahweh Shamar Yahweh Tazalia Ayub Yim Yawamam Hashamash La Kaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamari Makam Ra Yashamar Na Pasha Yahweh Yashamar Hawalakya Wabawaaya My Fa Wa Aid I Walam Basham Yahweh Shai Aman.
Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. From whence cometh my help? My help coming from the Lord which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer that foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shema Yasharallah, Hero Israel. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Echad.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abinawe Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shanka Yahweh Malakwat Kaf Taba'e Rotazawanka Hayya Aisha Barataza Kabashemayim Nathan Lanawe Laksam Yawan Zab Wasalak Lanawe Kabawak Nawe Kasalak Nawe Kabawat, Walla Abiyarnawe, oh, Messiah one, above, how it shine our Marakaya, Laka, Hamalakwa, Wa Allah, Wa Faparat, Why will Aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Amen. I sure am a Tazawa, the Ten Commandments. La'at, Yahayat, Lakat, Alahayim, Akharim, Alpanyat, La'at, Thaishat, Lakat, Pasog, Wala'at, Thaibadam, La'at, Talakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashawak, Zakar, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, La Kodashwa, Kabad, Abiyakab, Wa Amakab, La'at, Daratazak, La'at, Thana'at, La'at, Daganab, La'at, Thainad, Shakur, La'at, Thachmad, Ko, Asherat, Lara'ika, Amen.
Exodus 20 and 2. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandment. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and holiday. Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Amen. Yeshabwa, be seated. Barakataya Hawa, Bashimi Hawa Shai, Sharan, and the now Paria, Gapan, Thuata Aman. La Yahwa Bashimi Hawa Shai of Yashar. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. And Magwa, Panuay Roslam, stand to face Jerusalem. Barakatha Yahweh, Agadah, Rakawam, Abiyah, Wanawa El Yawan, Malak, Shal Shamayim, Warataza, Wako, Dabarium, Kayayam, Wagam, Mamashiach, Mayahawa, Arawanawa, Ahabnawa, Apula, Yawa Aitaza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahawa, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yashala, Zarnawa, Bana, Wasak, Yashala, Oh, Nanawa, Yam Yan, Aitha, Kayawam, Makodam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah wa Tazwadak Alahayim La Maganawa Rapharnawa wa Shamar Ilnawa by Shalak Haroka Shao Yawashai Lanawa Lalabanawa Rabiam Kakamai Thabawane Wada I Shao the Barka Basham Yahweh the Water Thum Yad Why Aman. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, and wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, Most High, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the Spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ashereb, Nathan Lanawa, Hathawarat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ashereb, Nathan Lanawa, War, Lara Awat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherab, Nathan Lanawa, Hasheman, Salat. Quran, Hayot, La Korab, Ha'aim, Yishabwa, be seated. Almost set the oil by accident. Not this time. We got extras in the back. In case Kahanyan don't know. All right, so Shalom Yasharala. All right. So Shalom, everybody that's here in Philly. Shalom to all the brothers and sisters on live stream, and even strangers, right? Alphabet Gangs K, right, to listen in. And Shalom, everybody listening in on a teleconference. Welcome to Hayashala Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the so-called Black, Latin, and Native Americans, found mainly here in the Western Hemisphere, make up the 12 tribes of Israel, once lost, now found. That we fall into a lower state, politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God, found the Bible given to us by Moses. And that we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to the commandments we broke, by following Jesus Christ as our example, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. One way we do that is by keeping the high holy days, and right now we're keeping the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or I should say the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is also known as the Passover. So that's what we're keeping right now. So my name is Nabia Zerubbabel. I have the privilege of doing the service this evening. Just write down for your records that today, according to the Gregorian calendar, will be April 25th, 2021. But according to the Hebrew calendar, it would be the first month and the 15th day. First month and the 15th day. As we're going to read is when the Passover, or the Pasach in the ancient Hebrew, that's when this day comes in. It comes in around this time. And of course, peace and shalom to all the other congregations, because we know some congregations may have kept it in the last month and not kept the 13th month this past year, which is, like I said, understandable. For those that wanted to keep it then, but then can't keep it, even within the law, there's a mechanism where say that you do, or you meant to keep it now in the first month, whenever you keep the first month according to the moon, and you were unclean for some reason, the Most High said you can keep it even in the second month, right? In the 15th day even. Right? In case something comes up that first month where you're not able to keep it due to uncleanness, or you're far away, you have to travel or whatnot, what have you. For some reason, you're just not able to keep it. So let's start with the main chapter that we go to, where we go into the beginning of the instruction for how we keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the first day, which is the Passover. We can go to Exodus chapter 12. We'll start at verse 1. And I'll try to be as brief and as complete as possible, so that we have a full service, but at the same time, we don't drag along too long. As we know, some folks need to get their rest. Either way, let's come together and let's know why we keep this day and why it's so important. Actually, why it's actually the most important holiday that we keep, which is only going to be second to the day of the Lord, whenever that day is, which we know when Christ makes a second coming, that'll be the high holy day that takes the preeminence, even over a day like this, or the Passover. So let's go to Exodus chapter 12. Let's start at verse 1. Let me get a reader from the audience, Baba Kushan, that can read, and I'll give the sense as we go.
Exodus chapter 12 and 1.
Everybody has it, right?
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying.
Right. So here we have the Most High. You see Lord in all caps, that's Yahweh, right? It says he spake to Moses and Aaron. They were brothers. They both came out of the tribe of Levi. It says in the land of Egypt, saying. So at this point, our people at that time who were in Egypt, who were living there for a little over 400 years, 430 in particular, when we were brought out, which we're going to read later on in this chapter, we were all in Egypt at this point. Now Most High is going to give Moses and his brother Aaron, his older brother Aaron, instruction on what to do next at this point. So read on in verse 2, Baba Kushab.
This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
Right, so it says, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. So let us know, as we're going to read, the first month and the 14th day at even, which is also the 15th day. When the sun sets, that's when the new day comes in. It's letting us know that what? That would be the first month of the year. So it's showing us that what, according to our calendar, not according to the calendar of the oppressor, because anytime a nation takes over us, they impress upon us the way that they keep their times, the way that they celebrate things, or the culture they celebrate. Now, according to our custom, the new year is in this time, in the springtime, not in the dead of winter like we see now with the Gregorian calendar, where they say January 1st is the beginning of month. Actually read it in the scriptures. No, it always comes in the springtime, because the new year has to always align with the harvest season, right? If you read the scriptures, the new year comes in on the time of the barley harvest. You read the scriptures, right? So the harvest seasons line up with when we keep major holy days. The Pasach, or the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we keep in the spring month, or the spring season. We keep it in the first month. Let's continue in verse 3, Baba Kushan.
Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb of an house, a lamb for an house.
Come. So now he's telling Moses and Aaron to what? Say to who? The whole congregation of Israel. Tell them what? In the 10th day of this month, you shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers. Right? So about 5 days ago, right? A couple days ago, we were to what? Seek out or search for a lamb, right? It says a lamb for each household, right? According to the house of their fathers, because we were in Egypt, but all our tribes were there, meaning Jacob or Israel and his 12 sons who became 12 tribes. When we first went into Egypt, we read about Jacob and the 70 souls, right? Which were his sons and his daughter and their families, right? We made up 70 souls at that time, right at the end of, say, the time of Genesis. So fast forward to now, we're coming out of Egypt about 430 years later. We have increased since then exponentially as a people, right? As we read on, we're going to see how many of us, men of us were at this time, just to show a lot of things can happen in a 400-year period. But it says all of our tribes and every household amongst the tribes were to what? Take a lamb for each household. What were we supposed to do with it? Verse 4 is going to tell us.
And if the household be too little for the lamb,
let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb.
Right. So now it's letting us know the what? To share when needed, right? Because you might have a household that has too little or one that has too much, right? So to divvy up the lamb, right, accordingly, so everybody has their necessities so they can partake in the feast of the Passover, right? Which includes what? This particular lamb, as we're going to find out. Read on in verse 5.
Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats.
So it says our lamb, what? Shall be without blemish. So as far as this condition, you're not going to get a lamb that's like malformed, right? Missing an eye, right? Or got a gimp or a limp leg or something. You want to make sure you get a wholesome lamb, right? That's complete, healthy. Because remember, we're supposed to be offering this to the Most High. So we're always supposed to give our best to the Most High, right? Because He's the one that blessed us with our best. That's why it's only natural for us to give our best to Him. Because how else can we get the best things unless it's from the Most High, or the Most High allows it? So it says, a lamb of the first year. So it has to be at least a year old. So it can't be too young. It has to be at least a year old as far as the lamb. But then it says, you shall take it out of the sheep or from the goats, right? So a lamb, usually we think of a lamb, we think of it being a young sheep, but it can also pertain to a goat as well as far as this offering, right? So we can use a goat as well, which you'll see in the scriptures and other places as a young goat's referred to as a kid. But you could use goat meat as well, or use a goat as well for the offering. Let's read on in verse 6.
And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening.
Right. So that 10th day we're supposed to find it, get it, right? Keep with it. Then it says, when the 14th day of the month comes in, which was today at sundown, we came into the 15th day. It says the what? The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, right? So when the sun sets, that's when you're supposed to kill that lamb that you have, right? And it's going to go on to what else we're supposed to do reading on. Now, of course, us not being in Egypt, us not being in our land, we might have to get a lamb from somewhere else, right? Like a store or a butcher or what have you, right? Now, if we had farmland these last days, right, which some of us may have, even though a lot of us are city mice, but for us country mice, we might have the means to do it, right? We can get our own lamb if we indeed have a pasture. But no, that's not the case for most of us. Either way, we do it to the best of our ability, even though we're far away from our homeland, right? Being in a modern day Egypt, right? Which is America, at least as far as us that are here right now. So read on in verse 7.
And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door post of the houses, wherein they shall eat it.
Right. So as they dress this lamb, right, of the first year, they'll take the blood of it, and it says, wherever we were living at in Egypt at that time, the doorway, right, has two posts and then one up top. We're supposed to take the blood of that lamb and spread it on the two sides and on the top posts, where you go in and where you come out of your house. Read on.
And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
So it says, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire. It says, so not only are you supposed to cook that lamb of the first year, right? It has no spot or blemish. and eat that, each household amongst Israel, wherever we were at, it says that what? We're supposed to eat it with unleavened bread too. This is why this feast is known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Even though the first night of this feast we keep and call the Passover. Sometimes there might be confusion, like, okay, is it the Feast of Unleavened Bread or is it the Passover or Pasach in the Hebrew, right? The understanding is, as we said earlier, the Passover or the Pasach in the ancient Hebrew is just the first day that begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which, as we're going to read, we're going to find out that it's a week-long feast. But then it says, with bitter herbs they shall eat it, right? So we got the lamb, but then we also have what? The unleavened bread, right? Which is pretty much bread made from some kind of flour, right? That what? Hasn't had or allowed yeast to what? Entered into it, to where when you prepare bread, typically you allow yeast to make it to rise, right? To get bigger, right? To make bread of it or cakes and whatnot. It says the what? We're not supposed to give that bread time to even rise with the yeast. We're supposed to eat the bread without any leaven in it, right? So just the wheat flour prepared without preparing it with leaven to cause it to rise, say like when you bake it, for example. So it's supposed to be unleavened bread, and then it also says bitter herbs, right? Which bitter herbs are going into what? Vegetables or roots that when you eat, they're bitter to the taste. And I see the Akim here, he's smiling because a lot of us during this time of Pasach or Passover, that's our favorite part, right? Where we get to partake of the bitter herb, right? I burnt that already. Which we usually use horseradish, right? Which, packs quite a punch. But if that's too strong for you, you could use something like a romaine lettuce, right? Especially if you have a certain sensitivity, or if you have young children that are keeping the Passover, you might start them off with romaine lettuce as a bitter herb, for example. So it says in verse 9, this is talking about the lamb. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs and with the purtenance thereof. So it says, don't eat the lamb raw. It says, nor sodden at all with water, meaning what? Don't boil it, right? But roast with fire. So you want to roast it with fire. That's how you're supposed to prepare this. So Most High's given us all the instructions on how to prepare this lamb around this time, right? It says his head with his legs and with the purtenance thereof, right? So cook the lamb whole, right? When you prepare this lamb. Like I said, apply grace if you're not able to get a whole lamb, which can be expensive, or if that would be too much for your household, just apply grace and try to do it to the best of your ability. So you get to get lamb, say, from a supermarket instead of getting it directly from a butcher. You can keep this particular law closer to what we read. So keep it all together. And we may not see that word pertinence a lot, right? So let's take a look. I got here I'm going to use this probably later in this chapter. Let's look up that word pertinence. So I want to go to dictionary.com. I'm going to put in pertinence. Sometimes in the King James Bible, we may find words that we don't use as much now, but it's still good for us to know. So it says here on dictionary.com, the liver, heart, and lungs of an animal, right? So in short, the internal organs, right, of the animal. We're supposed to keep those with it, not to remove those, right? So we're going to cook it whole. All right, so let's continue. So let's read on in verse 10. It says, ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire, right? So for every household that has a portion of this lamb, you're supposed to cook it, like we read here, right, with fire. We're supposed to consume it entirely, right? And there's no leftovers, so to speak, when it comes to this land, right? If there are leftovers, we're not supposed to keep them for the next day and go, oh man, that Passover lamb was good tonight, but it's even better tomorrow night, right? Like we're so accustomed in the modern era, right, to reheat food, right, in the oven or on a stovetop or in a microwave. Mosai said, not with this, right? Consume that which you'll consume. Consume everything that you prepared, right? Anything that you have left over, make sure you do away with it, right? No leftovers when it comes to this lamb. But let's read on in verse 11. Did I start reading?
Yeah.
Sorry, you can keep going. That's my bad.
And thus shall he eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover.
Right, so this is important when we get into this section, right? So what's the Most High telling Moses and Aaron to tell the people? You shall eat it, it says, with your loins girded, right? Meaning what? Your loins referring to your midsection, right? Or the core of your body. Meaning what? You're dressed. You're ready to go, right? Just like with our garments that we wear, we'll wear a girdle around our midsection, right? It says, and your shoes on your feet, right? So have your shoes on. It's not like you're just sitting up in your home, just, relaxing, like, oh yeah, cooking up this lamb. It says your shoes on because why? Something's going on right now. It says, and your staff in your hand, right? Which you carry a staff, right? You use that to walk with. So have our shoes on, have our staff in our hand. Why is it saying that? As we read, we're going to find out. Because right now, for the 12 tribes of Israel, it's time to go, right? We're going to enjoy this Passover, right? But once we finish, we're on the move, right? We're leaving. We're leaving Egypt, right? Because we were there, as we're going to read, for over 400 years. Now it's time for us to go. You read in the previous chapters, it's back and forth between Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh. They go back and forth where Moses goes to Pharaoh on behalf of the Most High saying, let my people, the 12 tribes, go. And Pharaoh would refuse, and then the Most High would smite the Egyptians with a certain plague, but wouldn't smite us with that plague, where we were at within the country of Egypt. And then they would go back and forth, let my people go. Pharaoh would say, okay, fine, I don't like this plague that your God gave me. Fine, go ahead. Then the Most High will harden his heart. Pharaoh will go, no, I want you to stay. I don't want you to go, right? Because, they were able to use us as subjects, right? To build up their empire among other, as well as other nations. They didn't want to leave us, let us go. Then the Most High will smite them with another plague. And finally, we're at the 10th plague right here in Exodus chapter 12, right? The 10th plague, where Pharaoh's heart being hardened, hidden the Most High showing his power that what? Even for a mighty king of any nation, whether it's then or now, his heart is in the Most High's hands. He controls the king like a puppet, like a puppeteer, and the king is his puppet. Even though we would think, this mighty king, he can do this and do that. He has all types of military might and wealth and everything else. But the Most High looks at even the wealthiest man or the most powerful man as just like his plaything, like his toy, like his beast of burden. And Pharaoh was no different. So it says, eat these things in haste. Staff in hand, shoes on your feet, loins girded. It says, it is the Lord's Passover. So now we're about to find out why the Most High even calls this the Passover if we didn't know already. Read on in verse 12, Baba Kushan.
For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both men and beasts, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord.
Right, see? So he's telling us, right? The Most High. He says he's going to pass through the land of Egypt this night, and he will smite the firstborn, rather all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. It says both man and beast. So not only the nations, right? In this case, Matazarim in particular, them being the top nation. But it says even the beast as well. So the firstborn of even the beast, it says he's going to smite. This being that 10th plague that the Most High was going to smite the Egyptians with. They didn't want to let the children of Israel go, namely their leader, Pharaoh, or Ramses, when you read the scriptures. It says, both man and beast, and it says, and against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Now remember, we went into this on the, I think it was the Tuesday class, right? We were talking about how gods, right? When you see gods here in the English, you'll see in the Hebrew, Elohim, right? Which literally means powers or gods. Now we know that can refer to the spirits or the angels, right? Up in the third heaven that sit on the right hand, on the left hand of the Most High God or power. But they can also refer to men in the earth, right? That have what? A certain dominion, a certain authority, depending on the context. So this here is referring to what? Men. It's not referring to the idols of Egypt, because that's another discussion, right? The idols that Egypt dealt with. In this verse, it's talking about what? Their judges or their rulers. That's what God is referring to here. That's what Elohim is here, right? It can refer to men who have certain authority, like a judge. So that's what it's talking about here when it says that. And I can show you real quick. So I always like to, I like to do this more where we can show how even we would look certain things up so you can see it. So if I go to, say, for example, Blue Letter Bible, right? I like Blue Letter Bible as a source when it comes to looking up the original language of a certain verse or a certain expression. And then I gotta say, put in gods, for example. And in our list here, I'll go to chapter 12, verse 12. I'll click tools, and I'll get a breakdown of the Hebrew of this verse. But now if I go down here, I'm looking for the word in the Hebrew for gods, which when I scroll down, it says right here, Elohai or Elohayim. And then when I click this, this is Strong's H reference 430, right? If you go into a handheld Strong's, you can look this up this way too. But even here, you'll see when they break down this word and what it can mean. In the English, it comes up mainly as God, because it can refer to the Most High and the collection of angels together as a group. You'll see lowercase God sometimes. Sometimes even the English word judge, you'll have this word. Even here, an example of a goddess, this word being used. Great, mighty, angels, Godward, etc. Then you'll see here the definition of this Hebrew word and things can be used for. Rulers or judges, divine ones, angels, gods, right? So it can refer to rulers or judges. So in this context here, it's referring to rulers or judges. And then cool thing about this too, if you don't know how to use this, it'll show everywhere this Hebrew word comes up, because the English may not always be the same for that particular Hebrew word. You look throughout the King James. But that's what we have here. And that's the context when we read gods in Exodus 12 and 12. Let's continue on. Let's read 12 and 13. If you read that, Baba Prashad.
And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt.
Right. So it says, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. That blood going back to what we read above in, what verse was it? Verse 7. So it says, it shall be a token upon the houses where ye are. It says, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. So this is why it's called the Passover. Because Most High is passing over our houses, those of us that were Hebrew Israelites at that time in Egypt, that death angel go past us that the Most High sent, but then go to the houses of all the families of Egypt because they weren't given this instruction, but we were. The Most High is going to pass over our houses and then go to their houses. Then it says that he'll smite the land of Egypt. Read on in the next verse.
And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever.
Right. So this is supposed to be a memorial, right? Every time this day comes around in the year, we're supposed to keep this. Yeah, we're going to keep it at this time, right? When we're first leaving Egypt. Every year going forward as a reminder of the Most High delivering us or having us come out of Egypt, smiting the Egyptians, but then delivering us or saving us. We were to be reminded of this every year and to keep this every year going forward. No matter how much time has gone by, like right now, we're in so-called 2021. Wherever Israel is at in these last days, whether it's in the Americas or somewhere else in the world, we're supposed to be keeping this around this time of year in the spring season in the first month. That's why it says, throughout your generations, by an ordinance forever. Read on.
7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel.
Right, so it says 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread, right? So this being the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but it's also called the Passover. It says, how many days? 7. Which shall ye eat unleavened bread? It says, at what? Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses, right? So anything that has leaven in it, right? Or things that will cause leaven, right? We want to make sure that we remove those foods from your household, like we've been talking about these last couple of weeks, right? Even sharing information about it as far as things to look for when it comes to ingredients. Now even in the modern era, when it comes to Esau and how he has produced food, he'll put a lot of additives and extra things in food. So we have to look at the ingredients and see, okay, what has leaven, what doesn't, and take those things out or eat those things before this day comes in. Right? Consume them, put them away, or just throw them out. So that's what the Most High is instructing us to do. And as we're going to read, we're going to find out, why we have this importance behind not eating things with leaven in them, right? Did I see a hand or? So that's what we want to do. That's what the Most High is telling us to do. And for how long? From that first day starting tonight, 7 days, right? Until the sun sets on that 7th day. It says if we do that, when we know better, that what our soul should be cut off from Israel. In other words, it just means we're supposed to be put to death. If we have the knowledge of this and we willingly go against it, we don't keep it. Let's read on in 16.
And in the first day there shall be an holy convocation. And in the 7th day there shall be an holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you.
Right. So similar to other holy days, it's letting us know that or holy weeks that we have in the other scenarios, like with the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Dedication, the first and last days of those feasts are considered holy convocations, where they're considered days of rest, but the only work that we're supposed to do in those days are that work pertaining to the feast, as far as preparing the food, or preparation, cooking, things like that. Unlike the Sabbath, which the Sabbath that comes every day of the every seventh day of the week, you can't cook on that day. This is like a Sabbath. The only difference being the work we can do is what, preparing food for that day. And we got specific ways, a specific food we're supposed to prepare today, which we just read about. That lamb of the first year, right? And cooking that and partaking in that. Read on.
And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in the self same day have I brought your enemy, your armies, out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever.
Right. So we're supposed to observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we see here being called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Right. That's what the week is called. But this that first day that we're keeping right now is the Passover, which is just the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Why? This same day he brought our armies out of the land of Egypt. That's why we keep it. The Most High delivered us from this bondage, this captivity at the hands of the Egyptians or the Mizraimites. It says that's why we're supposed to observe this in our generations for an ordinance, or by an ordinance forever, right? So forever, meaning we still should be keeping it now. Even when Christ makes his second coming, we're supposed to keep it then as well. So we're still going to keep this even after Christ makes his second coming and sets up Israel as a ruler in the earth again, like we were before. We're still going to be keeping this day, right? So it only behooves us to start keeping it now, especially if we have eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to understand. So read on. Actually, someone else could pick up from here, Baba Kushan, since you read pretty a good deal.
And one thing that I noticed in where it says in the first day, in the 16th, right, so in 15, since the Most High doesn't want us to eat 11 of 7 days, the key is preparation. So when I read 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, even the first day you shall put away leaven. I'm thinking that is even the first day of the first, even the first day of the month, our first month, we should start putting away leaven out of the house. We can eat leaven up to that point, right? But then, beginning of the feast of the seventh day, we should not eat anything leavened. For purpose of preparation, from the first month we start thinking removing things that has leaven in the house. But that doesn't mean in the first day of the month you should not eat leaven. But you should start preparing, because that's the day the Most High is very specific, just so you don't get tricked, right? You start on the seventh day and you still have leaven. Then you might get leaven in your stuff if you're not preparing from the first month. Beginning the first month of that year, we should start thinking the feast is coming up. We should start getting the habit of getting leaven away from our house, so that we don't start doing it. As we see the seventh day, that's when we start pulling stuff out of our house.
You said the seventh day?
No. From the beginning of the month, we should get in the habit of start putting away leaven out of the house. That doesn't mean you not eating leaven, but start putting away stuff that has leaven in preparation for the feast of unleavened bread that's getting ready to happen.
Okay. Khan, so could someone else pick up in verse 18, Baba Kushan?
I'll pick up. Exodus 12:18. In the first month of the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread. Until the 21st day of the month at even.
Right. So it says the first month, the 14th day of the month at even, right? Which happened when the sun went down today. It says, we shall eat unleavened bread. It says until the 21st day of the month at even, which is what? 7 days later, right? Because 7 times 2 is 14, times 3 is 21, right? 3 weeks. Read on in 19, Baba Krishan.
7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses. For whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land.
Right. So it says 7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses, right? So you want to remove it, like we were talking about earlier, you know, the importance of preparation. And like we see it here, even within the chapter, as far as even when it comes to the lamb, it says to look for that lamb on the 10th day. The Most High in his infinite wisdom knowing, yeah, check for the 10th day for that lamb, right? To get that ready, because you want to make sure, okay, I got enough in my household, or I might have a little more than what's needed. Let me talk to my neighbors. That all takes time. So important point Kaham brought out about that preparation. You see it here within the chapter, even when it comes to getting the lamb or securing that lamb. But it says here, anyone who partakes in leaven or something with leaven in it, has it in their household, they shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, which just means put to death. It says, whether he be a stranger or born in a land. So whether it's Israel that's coming from far off, that lives somewhere else, outside of where our mainland would be, or if it's someone that was born in the land of Israel that grew up in Israel, right? So it's saying that it doesn't matter. As long as you're Israel, regardless of where you're from, whether or not you have an inheritance, right, in that land, or if you're far away coming back just to keep it, you're supposed to what? Keep that leaven away and wherever you dwell at, right?
Just to emphasize that again, something that is that strict and that important, you want at the 6th day, right, of the month, I mean, at the 6th, that's when we start, oh man, let me start putting leaven away. The mindset starts at the beginning of the month. That's the month right here. So let's start getting in the mode. So that you don't want to get caught off. You don't want to, that day is very important. You don't want to start, get caught up and, start, so preparation is key.
Come. So reading on, verse 20, right?
You shall eat nothing leavened, in all your habitations shall you eat unleavened bread.
Right. You shall eat nothing leavened, in all your habitation you shall eat unleavened bread. So I know we were talking about some vocabulary earlier, but notice what it says here when it says stranger, right? Because what? Stranger, we know stranger can talk about what? Our people that grew up, or that we may have grown up in a Gentile frame of mind, or we just didn't grow up in the land of Israel, which we could say for the majority of our 12 tribes, we could be considered to be strangers. But then you also have stranger referring to what? A person, according to the seed of their forefather, is not of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Also referred to as a heathen in the scriptures. But once again, a good reference to use when we look up in the concordance, we can see when certain words are used, stranger can mean one or the other. When we use the Hebrew as a reference, it can help us to know, oh, okay, here we know when it says stranger, it's talking about this. So we know what the context is right. There's other words like that as well. Like when we talk about the word virgin, for example, right? There's 2 Hebrew words for virgin based on the 2 English definitions for the word virgin, right? When you cross-reference that with the original text, you can see it to be the case. So in the case of this verse, Exodus 12 and 19, I did what I did earlier, right? I looked up the verse and I went into the tools for it, right? And I see it here in the Hebrew. And if I go down, I get the word gar, which is Strong's H16 and 16, where it says, Hebrew, right? So when we look at the definition here, gar, right, we see a sojourner, right, which just means a traveler. And we also see a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights. It also says of foreigners in Israel, though conceded rights. Like I said, concordance is, like I said, it's a reference to the scriptures. So it's a supplementary thing. It's not a primary source. It would just be a supplementary source. Because the scriptures themselves are primary, right? When you read it with the proper context, we know what it's saying. But we use this as a support tool to make sure we have the proper understanding. And it's funny because when you go into strangers, you'll see a different word as opposed to this word here. What we see here, this word is used to refer to pertain to foreigners in Israel, meaning someone as other 12 tribes, but they're not originally from. They don't live in that particular land. And we definitely have to apply that now because what? We had a handful of us that are in that land right now, and we see that a lot of people caught that actually migrated in these last days, right? And they say, "Oh, we're going to force you into what's that city? Damona. We're going to have you here, right? But we're going to afflict you here. We're trying not to give any attention to you guys here, so people don't even take that in their mind like that. We could be the Jews, right? And anytime we talk about us being the actual Jews, we're mocked by Western society. They say, "Oh man, really? Like that's as far as you're going now, right? To say that you're a Jew, like you guys are that lost. Now you're saying that you're God's chosen people. Like, what's it going to be next?" But it's like you didn't say that when we were saying we were Islam or following the Arab culture. You didn't say it when we followed the Egyptian culture. You didn't laugh at us then. We call ourselves Jews. Now all of a sudden, oh, that's so crazy. Oh my God, really? Like that's reaching. It's like, yeah, it's reaching in the right direction for once, right? It's actually showing that we're not confused when we do that. But it's neither here nor there. But yeah, H1616, when we see this kind of stranger. But we'll come back to this. Let's go back to Exodus 12. Let's read on in 21, Baba Bashar. If you can read that.
Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover.
Right. So now they're going to take the Most High's instruction and actually implement it. So now Moses is getting in gear based on what the Most High told him. It says what? He called for all the elders of Israel, right, the leaders, said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover, right? Referring to that lamb without spot or blemish. Read on.
And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning.
Right. So now he's instructing what? The people to what? Use hyssop, right? As like a means to spread the blood on those doorposts, like we read in verse 7, right? Hyssop being a particular herb, right? When you look it up. You look up hyssop. And it's funny because you go into hyssop other places in the scriptures. It goes into the properties of it having like certain cleansing properties. You go into the virtue of that particular herb of hyssop. That's kind of its own discussion, but it's interesting that they mention that here too. So take the blood that's in a basin, right, that we got from the lamb, get the hyssop in there, and then use that to spread the blood on the side post and the top post of the door. But then he also says what? He tells the people that they should not go out at the door of his house until the morning. So once you got your lamb that you need and you prepared it, stay inside, right? Don't go outside. Don't go out and hang out and all that. Stay inside because you don't want to be outside when I bring that angel of death, when I send an angel of death to come through. It's funny because that even though it's poorly casted, a lot of us, even the younger of us, have seen was it Cecil B. Mills' Ten Commandments movie, right? It's like a famous movie where they got Charlton Heston playing, someone who's a man of color, clearly, right? When you read the scriptures, but there's that scene where Joshua tries to go outside, and he says, Let death pass, Joshua. Let death pass. Right? So everybody likes to quote that line, right? Like, man, that's heavy. Right? But that's what really was going down, right? Wherever we were at, whatever household we were in, we were staying inside to avoid that angel of death coming by. So that it passed over our house and then went to theirs. Let's read on in 23.
Verse 23, for the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts. The Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you.
Right. So that's that particular Elohim or destroyer. That's the one he sent in to kill the firstborn. So the Most High's angels or messengers or gods, we looked at that word earlier, right? Elohim. They can serve many purposes. We see this one serves that purpose, right? As a destroyer. So you can read on in 24.
And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever.
So no matter what time we're supposed to do it from then till now, right? And our children after us. Read on.
And it shall come to pass, when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he has promised, that ye shall keep this service.
Right, because remember, at this time, we're still in Egypt, right? This is our last night there, right? So, take a look around, time to go, right? And you're not coming back. We're not going on a vacation and coming back. No, we're leaving for good. And from this point, we're not going to look back. Well, we're not supposed to. But we see what happens. We read throughout Exodus, Leviticus, right? That a good number of our people, especially that first generation, not the kids, but the parents that came out, they look back. Right? They wanted to go back to Egypt. Right? But that's another story for another time. But it just shows you, kind of like we were joking about it earlier before we started the service about habits, right? Habits can be constructive and destructive, right? We can have good habits and also bad habits, right? So we'll find with Israel, a lot of Israel, throughout the first 5 books of Moses, especially after we left Egypt, that a number of them wanted to go back. They started having second thoughts after the Most High delivered us out of their hand. We wanted to go back and be captive under them. We said, we had a better deal with the Egyptians, right? And the Most High had to deal with that attitude, and deal with it swiftly. So read on, Baba Gosha. 26, I believe.
And it shall come to pass when your children shall say unto you, what mean ye by this service? That ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed their head and worshiped.
Right. So now he's telling them, look, when each generation comes in, right, the youth come in and they ask you, Dad, Mom, why are we doing this? You're supposed to tell them, here's what happened, son, daughter. When we were captive under the Egyptians, the Most High delivered us through a mighty hand and a stretched out arm, right? And allowed us to come out while smiting them, right, for their evil. So that's supposed to be the tale, which is not just any tall tale like, people tell their kids fairy tales, right, about, fanciful stories. This is reality. We're telling them, look, this is what the Most High actually did for us. As miraculous as it sounds, this is the Most High's power. This is what he can do. So, 29. Oh, Salah.
Verse 28. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they.
So they listened and took heed to what Moses and Aaron said as they were dictated to from the Most High.
And it shall come to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle.
So this is something that's miraculous, right? The way the Most High did this. And we see here, we talk about in the law, you should not respect persons, right? Whether somebody be rich or poor, right? You're supposed to judge them with just judgment, right? Not show favoritism because, they're famous. So, oh, they have a lot of money, right? Or they're popular. No, if he or she does wrong, they shall be judged for the right or wrong that they do, right? So we see with the Most High's judgment, it's a reflection of that, right? So it only makes sense he would give us a law like that because he's doing that with them. So whether it's Pharaoh on the throne or if it's just the person in the dungeon, right? If they're firstborn, they're going to die. And it's funny because you'll see in these History Channel archaeology documentaries, right? Some of them with bones galore, right? I mean, not the truth, things you want to spit out. They'll, try to explain these things with science, right? Try to explain how the river was, red with blood when they go into these plagues, right? Or they talk about, how the lice, got there, or how the frogs got there, right? They'll talk about, the seasons. This was frog season or lice season. There was an outbreak. They'll try to explain it through rational means, but they always leave a blank when it comes to this, because how do you explain this, right? Is there a virus? Is there some kind of phenomenon that knows only to go after the firstborn? Is there some kind of disease, right, that it just knows, oh, you were the firstborn of your parents, so I'm going to jump on you and kill you and only you? How do you explain something like this? How do you rationalize this and say, oh, it wasn't God, it was just, the force of nature that did this? So they try to explain this away. Okay.
I guess that's why the scripture says signs falsely so called.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the scripture there's signs, but that's the real signs.
Yeah.
Right. So they cannot explain it to their signs falsely so called, but the scripture signs prove that happened. But only those with faith can understand that science.
Yeah. And it's funny you mention that, Khan, because this actually shows that we understood science even back then, because that's the whole point of a miracle, right? It's going beyond the laws of nature, right? Which is science. You could say a general definition of science is the laws of nature, right? Now we're talking about supernature, or what they call supernatural, just means above nature. Meaning it's doing something beyond what we'll normally see, like fire burning, or water making wet, right? Or what goes up must come down, right? Or what goes in the water must sink, right? So just by that alone, we see what the miracles are that happen. It's showing you that, yeah, our forefathers that wrote the prophecies of old and foremothers, they speak to that like, yeah, the Most High did this, which was outside of what we would normally expect, which was science, natural phenomena. We have plenty of examples of that throughout the scriptures.
Right. I mean, Esau, a man's science, they stand on it because it's reproducible. If you can reproduce it, right? If you can do it again, okay, then I can validate it. But now when you speak about things like turning rivers and every vessel of thing to blood, or the seas parting the way it did in Jordan River or the Red Sea, those things, it's not easily reproducible. So I can't believe that ever happened. And that's just it, because if you can get on camera and do it again, you can put it in the textbook, allow the next person to do it, then that's solid. That's science. That's solid. You can do it. But now anything that calling fire down from heaven, come on, it sounds good. It's not real.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can't just do that. Like, all right. So that's where it comes from.
Come.
The conventional learning cannot prove that exists, right? So they won't go for it. But little do they know, there's a different way of learning. You learn through conventional learning. You learn through revelation, through faith. So all that is learning. But if you try to reason with conventional learning, you cannot, prove that with the scripture.
One more point on this before we continue on. And just like something we could always talk about, we can consider when we go out to camp, especially, right? Like we'll bring up these things, right? We'll bring up not only just these events, which they can laugh at, but we can bring up the aftermath, right? Which, going back to their faulty science, their science falsely so-called, even that will support these claims, right? And we can talk about, we're not going to read it tonight, but when you go forward in Exodus chapters 14 going into 15, we read about what the other great miracle the Most High did, where he allowed us to cross the Red Sea, but then he closed it back on them. So we can say all right, you don't want to believe in the Bible, but according to your archaeologists, they went to the bottom of the Red Sea and dug up the remains of chariots and wheels and helmets, right? And put them in a museum. According to your scientists, you guys took satellite pictures of the top of Mount Ararat. You guys got a picture of the ark, right? And it's even broken in two pieces. But then when you draw the scale and measure both pieces, as far as the length, they actually measure up to the same length that's found there in Genesis, right? As far as the distance of cubits. So your scientists actually can prove, right, what most people will call miraculous. But what it lets you know is, like you said, it's a spirit of belief or disbelief. Because I forgot to mention calling fire from heaven, right? Because people will do that at camp. They'll say, oh, you guys supposed to be the prophets of God. Okay. You make fire fall from heaven. I know you said about, it was Elijah, right? Make fire fall from heaven. Make fire fall from heaven. Now, for that person is that spirit of disbelief, the Most High can make fire fall from heaven for us right now, right? Right? And we could do that, right? If it be the Most High's will, we have that power. We're dealing with that same spirit. But now their spirit of disbelief is going to explain that too. They're going to have a reason around that too. Just like they did with our Lord and Savior. Oh, he hath a devil. He cast him out through the prince of devils, right? If fire actually fell from heaven at the camp, right? Say it just landed somewhere. Say it hit anybody, just landed somewhere. You know what they would say? Oh, no. See, there was a meteor shower happening around this time, according to, these people in this thing. See, that got through the atmosphere and it happened to land the same time you said that. See, that's what happened. The spirit of disbelief is always going to have a reason around what the Most High is doing and try to say, it's not the Most High, it's this. So that's why we tell the people at camp, even if we made fire fall from heaven, because your spirit of disbelief, you'd have an excuse anyway. You'd have a reason around why that happened, which is why Most High's not going to do it for you. Most High doesn't have to prove anything to you, right? Blessed are the eyes and ears and hearts of those that understand this. That's what we're out here for. We're not here for you. You got the warning. Keep it moving. We're going to go out here and preach this gospel for those that have eyes that see, ears that hear, a heart that's understanding to what? Be able to take this word in.
And also, Hebrews 11:6 tells us clearly, without faith, it is impossible to serve. So some of the things people can say, prove it, you're not going to be able to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You won't be able to put, and you don't have to go back and forth with some people, right? Because, like you said, they're not going to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have that faith. So they cannot serve the Most High. They're not going to see it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, I think we're in verse 30, right?
And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians. There was a great cry in Egypt, but there was not a house where there was not one dead.
Wow. So in every household, you had a firstborn somewhere, right? And if you were that firstborn, wasn't your day, wasn't your night. You're out of here. So that's the power of the Most High. And like I said, this being a miracle that they'd always, they can't even talk about this one. They just try to very slickly try to avoid talking about how something like this could happen. Right? Because there's no way to explain this, right? They can't make even now, right? We talk about coronavirus. They say, okay, is it something that comes from God, from nature? Is it something they made in the lab, right? We know they know the truth. It's both, because the Most High made man who makes whatever, right? So it's all the Most High anyway in the end. But can there be a virus, right, that can only destroy firstborn people, right? How would it know? So that's their best chance they have of trying to use science to explain this, but they just have to very conveniently not talk about it because they got no answer. So let's continue on in 31, and let me get another reader, Baba Kushan.
Verse 31. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said.
Right. So now he's telling them, okay, now that I'm jacking them up, right, with this destroyer, now it's time for you and the rest of the tribes to head on out. Read on.
Also, take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also.
Right. So take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also, right? Because I'm the Most High. I'm the reason why you're even able to get out of here. Because if it was by your own strength, you try to leave on your own without me, they would annihilate you, right? So take your flocks and your herds, right? Because they're going to be something that'll help, that you can nourish, or that you can use going forward. Read on.
Verse 33. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people, that they might send them out of the land in haste. But they said, we be all dead men.
Right. So it was amongst the Egyptians, they were like all for it, because after this 10th plague, they already got hit with 9 plagues before this. Now this plague here, I mean, just imagine, firstborn in your family. That might even be you, right? Depending on who we're talking to. You'll be at your wit's end, right? Get these people out of here, because they stay any longer, their God might kill us all off. So get them out of here, right? Read on.
And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading trough, being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders.
Right. So this is going into the unleavened bread, right? So we're leaving in haste. That's why we don't partake in the bread with leaven, because when you prepare bread with leaven to cause it to rise, that takes time. We're leaving in haste, meaning we don't have time. So you got to eat that bread with no leaven in it, because there's no time for it to even rise, because we're on our way out of here, right? So they're taking their dough that wasn't even that was leaven. It says in their kneading troughs, being bound up in their clothes, meaning the things they would use to take the flour and make it into bread, right?
Verse 35. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment.
Right. So we always laugh at this verse, right? Right, where it says borrowed of the Egyptians, meaning, it was like a parting gift. Thanks, we're out of here, right? And it's the least you can do, given the suffering that you caused us this 400 plus years, right? And I can even see it, us being back there. Say it was us back there, we don't know what generation we may have been at that time. We may have been the kids, we might have been the parents, who knows, right? I can see those Egyptians being like, get out of here, take it, just go, right? Read 36.
And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians.
Right, so you see the word still. Oh, here's I lend this to you. Then it says they got spoiled, meaning robbed. Meaning, thanks for that. I'm not going to see it again, but no problem. As long as you back it.
That's why the English language sometimes you gotta read the context.
Yep.
If you just take it literal, you will get you will think they borrowed, but it's not borrowed.
What's interesting is we read that here in the 12th chapter. It was mentioned in the 11th chapter, or before this, before it actually happened. Most High told Moses that was going to happen. Then you go back even further, before the plagues ever started. Most High told Moses that he was going to come out and we was going to do exactly what just happened that we read in the 12th chapter. That we were going to borrow of the Egyptians, but he said that we was not going to go out empty coming out of the captivity. But what that shows you is, in the midst or in the height of the punishment, all the harsh bondage that was going on, it was prophesied that this was going to happen. It's the same vein as right now, right? It's the same thing as right now. We still in the heart of the bondage. Those real hard plagues the Most High going to bring haven't really started yet. The Most High is still dealing with doing other things, but He's already told us how we're going to come out, how they're going to go down, how all these things are going to transpire. We still waiting on that. At the time when Moses first found out in Exodus 3:22, that was just the precursor. Like he didn't see a first plague yet, right? And he was already being told about the last plague and what was going to happen after it. So it's the same thing now. The faith sets in with the consistency of the Most High. You now begin to solidify your faith and say, you know what? Time and time again, He's always set the table and said, this was going to happen. Just wait for it. And it happened. And then things begin to solidify, and then boom, it happens. So everything that's going on now, it's the same thing. The Lord prophesied, told us to, hey, we want to come out. We're going to come out wherever we at, four corners. The chariot's going to come pick you up, take you back. You want to see your enemy's destruction. All these things are already laid out. So we're just waiting for those things to happen while we just stay consistently building ourselves up.
And also what you mentioned, it's Genesis 14:15. And they said we will come out and with great substance.
But I mean, I know what you're talking about as far as the coming out. But I mean, the thing about it, this was mentioned in 3:22. Everything that we just read in 12 was mentioned in 3:21 and 22. So when you start back in the beginning of Exodus and you say, hey, you want to leave, and when you leave, you ain't gonna come out empty. You're gonna come out with gold and jewels and this and the third. You like, you see what we going through right now? Well, man, they killing us right now. We still making bricks without no straw. What's going on? And then, boom, then you start seeing one after the other. The mice, the lice, right? The blood. You're like, yo, okay, I'm seeing it now. I got it. And then it happens. You're like, oh, okay. So it wasn't even, that the Egyptians were that just, lenient or afraid. Most I put the spirit in that. Because they had no thought about those things. They didn't consider anything like that was going to happen to them because of us. And that was going to transpire.
Come. So let's continue on. Exodus 3. So back in Exodus 12, let's continue on where we left off in 37. Yeah?
And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, besides children.
Great. So now we get an idea of how many of us that were out there. It only mentions the men, but it shows you just how much how exponential growth works, right? Because when we first got there, right, and got settled in that land, Jacob was an old man. His 12 sons were older, right? And it was 70, right? You read about Jacob and the 70 souls, right? That was his all his sons and daughter, their wives, and the families that they had at that point that made up 70 altogether. There's a certain place in Genesis where you actually read, and it tells you all those 70 souls, right? So from that to now, just the men alone being 600,000. So we grew pretty quickly over a 400-year period, right? So it shows you exponential growth can happen because people might scratch their head about something like this, or even go back before, like with the time of Noah after the flood, and they'll say, "Man, him and his 3 sons, how did they populate the whole earth?" It's just like given enough time, you can grow pretty quickly, right? Because the immediate family might take a while, but then you give it 3 or 4 generations, 5, 6, 7 generations. Now you're like, you got exponential growth now.
And it wasn't even 600,000.
Right.
It's just the men.
Exactly.
Right? So if you put a man with his wife and then his children, so you over 1 million plus whatever, right? Because we don't know the number, but you just estimate at least, let's just say half the men had wives and children. There you go.
Con. So you can read on in 38.
And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle.
Right. So it says a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds. It says even very much cattle. Right. So they were a mixed bunch. They had a diversity among them, right, as far as all the tribes that came out. Right. And I know people always when we had the discussion around the mixed multitude and who that was, right? They try to say, oh, Most High saved other people too, this, that, and the third, right? Now, we know we've had scenarios, even reading 4, where you might have had somebody else there because as we're traveling around, we're interacting with the different nations, right? But we know still the Most High is what? He's trying to firm up Israel as his people. So they're going to be there as a temptation as we move around from this time going forward. Because you read throughout the first 5 books, we're traveling to different places, different cities. We're encountering, different nations as we do that. So I don't even see why there's so much to do about that, because it doesn't defeat the fact that salvation is for Israel, right? Even when you look at it that way.
When you look at it in the previous verse, right, when he says the Most High in this day, the Most High take your armies out of the land of Egypt. And when you talk about armies, you're thinking about the men, right? Then, like to my point, then you have women and children. So you're gonna have a mixed multitude and a whole lot of people.
It's kind of reminiscent of Revelation 7, right, where it numbers 144,000 men. But then it says a mixed multitude, right? Well, he doesn't say mixed multitude, but let's get it real quick. Hold this. Go to Revelation chapter 7, and we'll come back. Revelation chapter 7. In verse 9. You can read that, Arya Kazak, Baba Kushan.
Revelations chapter 7, verse 9. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands.
Right, so they'll take a verse like this and say, see, look, it says, great multitude, which no man can number, of all nations and kindreds and people. Well, I think we were just talking about this in the class, right? I think the elder Zaquan was asking this question. There's a verse, I think, in Matthew, at the end of Matthew, where it says, preach this unto all nations. And you say, wait, what's going on here? I thought salvation was only for Israel. Why is this saying all nations? Because the truth of the matter is what? Yeah, all nations. Why? Because Israel was scattered amongst all nations, right? And you see that understanding throughout the scriptures. Even what we read earlier in this chapter, where he says what? Whether he be born in the land, right? Or if he were born abroad. This is before we even got into Israel. We were still living in Egypt at this point. The Most High even mentioned that, knowing, okay, there's going to come a time we're going to go in the land. But now there's still going to be some of you that aren't in the land, right? That may be living somewhere else. All because of, the curse and how the Most High said what would happen to us if we didn't keep the commandments, how he would scatter us. Allow us to come together, but then scatter us again, as long as we weren't obedient. So the Most High gave us the law in a way where it would cover us in all time periods. Even before things we would know, even before things would happen, the law would cover that. So it's interesting when you think about how the Most High would give us the law in his foreknowledge, his infinite foreknowledge. But yeah, it's just Revelation 7 and 9. But let's go back to Exodus 12 and let's read on. Let's read 39 now.
And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry. Neither had they prepared for themselves any victual.
Right. So they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, right? Hence the unleavened bread. So there's no time for leavened bread, right? No time to prepare leavened bread. We had to go. It says, because that they were thrust out of Egypt and they could not tear away, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual or food. You can just, you can write this down. I know I mentioned it, but Deuteronomy 28 and 64, just in case there was folks may have had a question like, how do I deal with that when it says preach to all nations? Or when it says mixed multitude, Revelation 7 and 9. Deuteronomy 28 and 64, that's a key verse to go to, where it speaks to what the Most High would do to the children of Israel, to where we will be scattered, brought up from all different places. and then brought back together from those different places. So you can read 64 and Deuteronomy 28 real quick, and then we'll pick back up here in Exodus 12 and 40 and finish this chapter up.
As I'm reading the Creole, it's really specifically tell you 600,000, right? Without counting women and children.
Come. So if you can read Deuteronomy 28 and 64, Baba Kushah.
Deuteronomy 28:64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone.
Right, so that being part of the curse, but the Most High said, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to scatter you throughout all nations, which he's done. We know now most of us are here in the Americas, right? There's many nations here too, along with us now. But we're all over the earth, even though the majority of us are in the Americas now. So the Most High, his foreknowledge, knew every time Israel would go off, that would be part of that punishment. To have us be taken into captivity here, taken into captivity there. Go to this place, go to this place, go to that land, go to this place. So, that's a prophecy, but now it's history. It's history and prophecy to us now in these days. It shows that the Most High is not a man that he should lie. He always told the truth. Even when we lied, even when we were deceived, he always told us the truth. So let's go back to Exodus 12. Let's read on in verse 40, Baba Kushan.
Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years.
Right, so showing you the full time we were there, it was 430 years before the Most High delivered us. So we talk about America being like a modern day Egypt, also modern day Sodom, also modern day Babylon, right? So if we mark when slaves were first brought to North America, right, we look at 1619, right? When the first group were brought to Jamestown, Virginia, right? And then we count from now till just last year, right? What was it, 2 years ago, when they say the year 1619, and they said they created a project. This sister created a project called the 1619 Project. New York Times was talking about it. They were trying to go into records showing like what actually happened during that time. So that was like a 400-year period from that time up until now, right? So if we were to be in here same time as Egypt, which we don't know how long we're going to be here, but we could definitely say that, yeah, if it were the same time frame as Egypt, that could mean we could be here till 2050. 2050, like 2049, 2050 would mark the 430 years for us in this modern day Egypt. Now, Christ will come back before that date. He could come after, right? The point being is that, we just don't know how long we have here. So the idea is to, like Isaiah 33 and 6 says, let wisdom and knowledge be the stability of our times, to where we operate tactically as though Christ will come back any moment, but then we plan strategically as though Christ will never come back in our lifetime. Right? As long as we keep those two ideas together, we'll never be thrown off our square, right? We'll never be taken by surprise. Because we saw what happened with a number of our brothers and sisters. It was before I came into truth, but I learned from brothers who came in before the year 2000, how a lot of brothers and sisters were deceived under a false notion that, when 2000 comes, that's it. Christ's going to come back. We're going to be set up in our kingdom. And they made certain provisions as if that year 2000 was going to be the year, and it didn't happen. And, some brothers and sisters just, adjusted and still stayed their course. But you had many others that were, disheartened. They're just like, we're still here. I sold all my stock in this company, that and the third, I went off and got off the grid and, bought some place in the wilderness where I got a little tent in the wilderness just waiting. And it's like, damn, we're still here. Now what am I going to do? Right? So a lot of our people that believed that falsehood, they went back in the world. But there wasn't a scripture we could go to show, year 2000, that's it. It's not anywhere written. So that would just be another proving ground, which we constantly see, where many are called, few are chosen. There's going to be a number of things that are going to be happening from now until Christ comes back, as people are called in, and then you got certain folks that fall out. Call in some more folks, and then a portion of that fall out for one temptation or another, right? And our hope is that, all of us that are here now and throughout our congregations that we, not only are we just called, but that we're chosen and that we stay the course. But ultimately, he knows. It's a revolving door. So when you get in the building, you want to stay inside. You want to stay at the party, right? You want to stay at the celebration. You don't want to go out that revolving door and you're outside like, wait a minute, what happened? Hey guys, let me back in. You don't want to be on the outside looking in. You want to come in. You want to stay in.
I mean, that's why I usually emphasize the kingdom mindset. Because if you stay in the kingdom mindset without the kingdom being here physically, you'll be okay.
Yeah, come. So we're in
Verse 41. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt.
Okay, read on.
It is that night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations.
Right. So that's why we remember this night, even to this time, even to this year. And every year leading up to when Christ comes back, wherever our congregations are at, that can hear, see, and understand that they should keep this day and keep it holy to the best of their ability, right? If they're not able to keep it in the first month, like the law says, they keep it in the second month, right? Because the Most High gives us that ability to do so. If for some reason or another we're not able to keep it in the first, just shows how important this day is, right? So it's a night to be much observed, right? A night that we're always supposed to remember. So it's very important. So let's read on in 43, and you can read that to the end. Come.
Exodus chapter 12, verse 43. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof.
Right, so it says, and the Most High said unto Moses and Aaron, it says, this is the ordinance of the Passover. It says, there shall no stranger eat thereof, right? So now, we were talking about a stranger before, but now what about this stranger? What stranger is this talking about? Is this talking about our people that were estranged from the Commonwealth of Israel, meaning we maybe grew up somewhere else? Because it says stranger, but now we know, depending on the context, stranger can mean or refer to one of two groups, right? This is not talking about us, right? Okay, does everybody see that? It can't be talking about us because before it said a stranger and it says they're supposed to eat it. But now it says no stranger shall eat of this. So is it contradictory or are we just talking about two different strangers? And now, just to show, like that's why I wanted to show the Hebrew of the one before, which was gar, the Hebrew word gar or gar. You see that word being used for our people that are like someone who's a foreigner, right? Someone who's doesn't grow up in the land, that doesn't have an inheritance tied to them, right? We looked at that Hebrew word. But now let me go back to the Hebrew again, and let's take a look at this word here, right? When it says stranger, right? When it says there shall no stranger eat thereof, right? So now I'm in Exodus 12 and 43. Let me zoom in a little bit so everybody can see it. I know it might have been hard to read before. But now check this out, right? When I'm looking at the concordance, and it says, it is night to be much observed unto the Lord for to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This is the night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in the generations. Then in verse 43, so like this verse, it says, there shall no stranger eat thereof. So now the other stranger, right? That was H16:16, but now this one is a different reference. Let's see what this one says. Right, so here we have another Hebrew word, nakar, right? When it talks about the stranger here as opposed to gar, right? So now we have nakar, right? Which we look at this, we see it translates as in English, strange, stranger, or alien. It says a foreign alien, foreignness, that which is foreign. Foreign gods, alien, or foreigner. So it's talking about what? A heathen or someone who's actually a stranger. Not as one of us that didn't grow up in the land of Israel, right? So one Hebrew word for one as opposed to gar for the other. So even the Hebrew backs up the context which we can understand just for reading the English. And now we can even go into the Hebrew, which backs it up. And then when I go throughout the different verses where this Hebrew word nakar shows up, we'll see it being used for someone who's of a different nation, not our people who grew up following different customs. See here, Genesis 17:12, right? Stranger is not of thy seed. So you'll see that this word come up for actual, literal, or actual strangers. Not our people that are just considered strangers or considered Gentiles based on us not having an inheritance, us growing up somewhere else outside of Israel. See, just remember those two words, right? You have gar, or H16:16, and nakar, H52:36. But let's go back and let's read 43 again, and let's read down. You read that from the top.
Exodus chapter 12, verse 43. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof.
Mm-hmm. So we established this is talking about an actual stranger, meaning someone who's not of 12 tribes. We don't.
But every man's servant that is brought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof.
Right. So you got to make sure if you're of the nation, you have to get circumcised for it first before you partake of that Passover, right? You got to have that as a requirement. Otherwise, don't partake of it, right? Even now, under grace, we even tell brothers to say, grew up in a certain place where they didn't get physically circumcised. We say, yeah, you can observe it, as far as removing leaven from your house and everything, but don't come together for the lamb, eating the lamb of the Passover until you get that part done, right? Which I know is not an idea, most of us want to think about getting circumcised as as an older person, right? As an adult, you usually don't want to think about that. I know my mother told me she saw when they did me when I'm in the hospital. She said when they snipped me, she said my little legs start to shake, She said, "Oh no, my baby!" Right when they circumcised me, but I don't remember that. I was 7 days old when that happened, right? Or 8 days, however many days old, right? They did it before we left the hospital. I know that much. But yeah, as opposed to doing it as an adult, but you're still going to keep the Passover, learn the truth. You're still going to want to get it done physically. You can come into the truth, yeah, and keep the truth, no doubt. But if you want to keep the Passover, when you get that physical circumcision. Some of us, had that experience, right, where we got it as an adult, as opposed to getting it when we were young, due to what Christianity may have taught or what worldly institutions may have suggested. The world gets some things right, even though it's the world, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, meaning It's good. Certain things that we learn or we grow up doing are right, but just mixed with things that are wrong. And a one I always put out there is like a common one is you know, dressing yourself up. Like we're not just out there, even though we got Esau especially like to do this. They had the little nudist colonies, right? They nude beaches, right? But that's something that most of us grew up learning, right? If you get to a certain age, even when you're a youngster, right? You just run around after you got the shower out the bath, you know. Right? Your parents say, hey, boy, girl, come here. Put something on, right? Or come here so I can put your underwear on, put your PJs on, right? So that's what we do. So we didn't learn the truth, but we at least knew that much. There's other laws we learned too, but you know, we always try to fill in the gaps. When we talk about the laws we're supposed to keep, people always gonna go, oh, all these laws, too many laws. It's like, relax, brother, sister. Most of these laws we already learned. Most of these laws we grew up following, right? Even dealing with the so-called Christian church or the Islamic mosque, we learn these things. But now I'm here to fill in the gaps because the Most High is supposed to do these things, not Christianity, not Islam. And here are the things that you're missing, right? Like the Sabbath, like the dietary law is supposed to be this way, or whatever, you know, you're trying to teach the person that they don't know. But when it comes to this, Passover is supposed to be circumcised. But I read on in verse 45.
A foreigner and an hired servant shall not eat thereof.
Right. So this is a foreigner and a hired servant shall not partake of this, right?
Verse 46. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof.
Right. So just to reaffirm what we read earlier about cooking the whole thing with the pertinence thereof, right? Back in verse 9. Read on.
All the congregation of Israel shall keep it.
Right. So cook it wholly, right? As you are able. Apply grace if you can't get a whole lamb, like we said before. But if you have the means to get a whole lamb, right, and prepare it for yourself and those that are part of your household or is doing it as a congregation, then follow this as best you can. We read here, as far as not break it up, not to break the bones, not to take out the pertinence, which is referring to the internal organs. Read on.
Verse 48. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof.
Right. So once again, you can't be uncircumcised and partake of the Passover if you're going to be an Israelite trying to keep this. And once again, like we were saying, always remember those two words we mentioned, the Hebrew word gar versus nakar. Gar referring to our people, because look, remember, nakar was H1616. See, look at the, when it says stranger here, see, it's that same one, gar referring to our people that are strangers, not the actual Gentiles. And then same thing here in verse 49, which you haven't read yet. One law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger. And just based on the context, you can see it's not talking about an actual stranger, actual Gentile, but it's talking about somebody that isn't born in the land of Israel, but someone that was born abroad. Because the Most High knew over time it would be spread out. So he covered that. Because he knew we would have had that question, right? Well, I don't know, like say in ancient times, right? Say during the time of Acts chapter 2, when they kept the Pentecost, they kept the Passover that year too, right? A couple months ahead. All the folks that were traveling from all over, right? They would have that question. They were coming from, Elam and from all the different places. I forget all the places, but Acts chapter 2 shows them. They would have that question. All right, I didn't grow up in Judea, right? So what do I do? Do I have to be circumcised as well? Or I'm coming from some other place in the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. Do I have to keep the circumcision as well? Can I even keep it? So the law already has that covered. So this is something interesting to think about. It also shows you the importance of inheritance. Mostly our spiritual inheritance being of the 12 tribes, but even the importance of physical inheritance. Everything revolves around what? Land, right? And the resources that a land bears, right? And the fact that the Most High is going to what? Still put us back in that land eventually. He's not saying it's not important. So spiritual and physical inheritance are both important. And for Esau trying to abolish things like this, like nationality, like inheritance, right? With their secret societies, right? That's all foolishness because the Most High made it very clear. He intended for nations to be spread out, not all together under one government, one banner. He said, when he divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam. So we see a lot of things, happening now in the society. They're being used, right? Because people will argue, okay, is this something of man, something of God, right? Like disease outbreaks and terrorism and stuff like that. We know it all comes from the Most High, but we definitely see a trend of Esau using that to try to what? Do what his father Nimrod did, right? Which is bring everybody together under one banner. I'm speaking spiritually, not so much physically, because he comes from Esau. Nimrod's a Cushite. I'm just saying they follow in that same spirit of the Hamites that ruled before, like the Babylonians, like the Sodomites, Sodom and Gomorrah, like Egypt, right? They follow in that same spirit. So them trying to bring everybody together is going against the Most High's will. And when the Most High sets Israel back up through his son Christ, we'll be the ones to show, look, this is what the Most High intended. He intended for you to have an inheritance, not to, get rid of your inheritance, right? This is where you're supposed to be. And according to the law, while you guys all have a place you're supposed to be, all of you belong to us. Because you read the law, all the nations belong to us. So the nations have their place where they live, but then they all belong to us at the same time, right? You can read Psalms 2, 7 and 9, where it says that. You read Leviticus 25, 45 to the end, right? Among other places. Or our favorite, Isaiah chapter 2, right? For the Lord have mercy on Jacob and yet choose Israel. Wait a minute. That's not Isaiah chapter 2. Where is that? 14, 1 and 2. Right. So we don't make the rules, but that's what the Most High intended. So nationality and inheritance are key. So let me minimize this, but let's read that again. So read verse 49 again, Baba Kushai, and then read the last two verses.
Exodus 12, verse 49. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 50. Thus did all the children of Israel as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they.
Right. So they all listened to what the Most High was saying, right? As Moses and Aaron instructed. Read 51.
And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies.
Right. So this is a record of what happened. This is a record of our deliverance coming out of Egypt, out of the hand of our oppressors, those of the Egyptians, or their Hebrew name being what? Matzarim, right? Or the Mizraimites. So let's go here. I mentioned it before. Let's go to Numbers chapter 9. This being an exception when it comes to what we're supposed to follow, what we're supposed to keep. Say we can't keep it in the first month, but we want to keep the Passover in the second month due to situations arising where we can't keep it in the first month. If you go to Numbers chapter 9, I'll start from 6. So Numbers chapter 9 and verse 6, just say come once you have it. So Numbers chapter 9 and verse 6, it reads, and there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day, and they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. So we're like a nation in progress, a nation learning their way. Moses gives us laws, but now situations are arising where we have questions. Okay, the law says this, but now we're in a situation. What do we do now? We're unclean. The law says we're supposed to be holy when we come together for a holy convocation, Moses. What do? We're unclean due to being in contact with a dead body, right? Because that may happen, right? You may have a funeral or something, and it's around the time of the Passover, right? It says, or you come across a dead body, God forbid, and you're going about, right? It says, and those men said unto him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of Yahweh in his appointed season among the children of Israel. Everything we just read in Exodus 12. And Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what Yahweh will command concerning you. So Moses, right, he's given all types of wisdom and knowledge, but even he was humble enough to know, okay, even for the things that I don't know, to defer to Yahweh, right, when it comes to certain things. Let me ask him to see what the best case is to do in your situation. And Moses said unto them, I read that, verse 9, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you, of your posterity, shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto Yahweh. So he may be unclean, we may be too far away to come together, right, with the congregation, right? It says, the 14th day of the second month at even, they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, just like we read in Exodus 12. So they're going to keep it in the second month in this case, in this scenario. It says in verse 12, they shall leave none of it until the morning, same thing, nor break any bone of it, right? Just to repeat what we already read. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. 13. But the man that is clean, that is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even that same soul shall be cut off from among his people, or put to death. So don't be on that spirit where it's just like, you could keep it, right? And you're just like, let's wait till the second month, just because. That's not what this law is for. This law is for those that can't keep it in the first month due to their situation, and the restraints that situation provides. So if you're able to keep it in the first month, keep it in the first month. Otherwise, you'll be cut off. It says, because he brought not the offering of Yahweh in his appointed season, that man shall bear his sin. Then it says, and if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto Yahweh according to the ordinance of the Passover and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. He shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. So another repeat of what we read before about whether you were born in the land of Israel. Remember, this is before they even got into Israel, but the Most High speaking as far as the future. You're born in amongst the 12 tribes, or if you live abroad as Israelite, you're coming back to keep that holy day. Make sure that you keep this. Doesn't matter if you're not, if you don't have an inheritance. If you're Israel living abroad, you're still supposed to come together in the place that the Most High chose to keep it. Now, in times past, we had the temple, right? So we could come back to no matter where we lived at in the earth, right? But now, we set up makeshift places, right? We appoint certain places that the Most High guides us to do within our different branches of Christ that have been called into this truth. And we keep the Passover that way. So I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to that first Passover that we do keep when all of us that are chosen, whether we be here in the earth at that time or we're in this third heaven, we first get brought back to the land, right? Imagine that Passover, right? Keeping it back in the land where it's supposed to be. as opposed to, oh, let me call this place, let me call that place. Let me call this brother, let me call this sister. They got a nice sized property. Maybe we can do it at their house. Maybe we do it at this hotel, or do it here, or do it there, right? Where we can actually keep it in our land. So yeah, so that's the beginning of the Passover. I'll just read these two other verses because I know it's getting pretty late. We're actually right by midnight. What I'll do then is after we read that, unless anyone else has any other things they want to share, we'll then go to the verse where we see Christ keeping the Passover with his disciples, right? Which the world commonly calls the Last Supper, right? They get that picture with Caesar Borgia, sitting like this, and they got the 12 disciples all painted falsely, right? Not looking like actual Jews. And I've seen, all different types of doctrines out there, even about that painting that Leonardo da Vinci allegedly painted, like it's supposed to be a woman sitting next to him. It's supposed to be Mary Magdalene, and all this other stuff. But yeah, what's that guy who writes those? It kind of reminds me of Indiana Jones stories. With Tom Hanks, he's chasing like different clues about archaeology and stuff. So Dark, The Con of Man. What was that movie? Right. What was the one before that though? Oh, got it. The Da Vinci Code. Right. So it's like that, and saying, oh, see, there was clues hidden within the painting. He was part of this secret brotherhood, and they were trying to hide the clues from, who was the Merovingian dynasty, right? Christ's lineage that came down. That's nonsense. We read the scriptures. Christ never took a wife, right? But now we can say that the family of Christ is still here because he had brothers and sisters. So whoever those Judites are now, we don't know, but they could be in the earth right now, here in the Americas. But as far as what they're talking about, that's confusion. That's a doctrine, you got to watch out for that. Anyway, Exodus 23. Exodus 23. I'm going to read verse 15. I'll start from 14. So Exodus 23 and 14. It reads, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. It says in verse 15, thou shalt keep a feast of unleavened bread, which we're keeping right now. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, the first day, as I commanded thee, in a time appointed in the month of Abib, which is the month we're in right now, right? Which you go into the Hebrew, it means in the ear, right? During the barley harvest, right? Which tells you when the plagues were happening, it says that what? The barley was in the ear and the flax was bold, right? So showing you what was growing at that time when we kept this holy day in this month. So barley season as far as the harvest. For in it thou camest out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. Right? So all supposed to bring an offering unto the Most High for this feast, right? And not appear empty, just like we do for the other holy days. And then another verse we can read for this too. Also in Exodus, chapter 34, in verse 18. Exodus 34 and 18, just say comment you have that. Exodus 34, 18 reads, the feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. So it's the feast that we're keeping right now, right? 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, as I command thee, in the time of the month of Abib, time we're in right now. For in the month of Abib, thou camest out from Egypt. And it says in verse 19, all that open up the matrix is mine, and every firstling among thy cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male, right? So it says open the matrix. So we're not talking about, Morpheus with the glasses saying, what if I told you, Neo? We're talking about the matrix, which means the womb. So look at the word matrix, it can mean the womb as well. not the matrix that we're more so familiar with in the modern era, dealing with like a grid, right? They call matrices plural, right? This is talking about the womb of a female, this matrix. So it says, all that openeth the matrix is mine, every first thing among thy cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male. It says, but the first thing of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb, and if thou redeem him not, then thou shalt break his neck. All the firstborn of thy sons thou shalt redeem, and none shall appear before me empty. Right? It's going to a time before Levi will be the ones that we will redeem, but just saying how all the firstborn will be redeemed as opposed to the firstborn being slaughtered, like as in the case with the Egyptians, who were to redeem the firstborn of all Israel. Hence, as you see throughout the scriptures, even before the time of Moses, the firstborn even getting that lion's share when it comes to the inheritance that comes from the father before. And notice what it says about an ass, right? It says, you shall redeem with a lamb, and if thou redeem it not, you shall break his neck. Because when you go into an ass, right, a beast of burden, it's not a clean animal, right? It has to what? Have a cloven hoof and chew the cud, right? When you go into an animal like an ass, which is like a horse, right? It chews the cud. You look at its hoof, it's not a split hoof like a goat or a sheep. I mean, a goat or a goat or sheep, or like an ox. It has a solid hoof. So that's why we wouldn't offer an ass, because it's unclean. It has value, but just not that kind of value to the Lord. It has served another purpose. So that's Exodus 34:18, and I stopped at 20. But let's go now. Let's go to Matthew. But I'm not sure if anyone else had anything else they wanted to bring out or touch on before we go into the next phase of the services. We're at the midnight marker. We passed the midnight mark. So, anybody, any takers or no? All right, so what I'll do first is I'll just read this just to show that the disciples kept the Passover. Matthew 26, we can go to verse 2, and then we'll jump down. So Numbers chapter 9:6. I read down to 14. So Matthew 26, and in verse 2, it reads, just say come once you have it. It reads, you know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Right? So the Passover is coming up, a glorious event during the time of Christ and his disciples. Then also a most unfortunate event, but a necessary event is coming too, which is Christ's betrayal, which he knows is going to happen to him. But now we jump down to verse 17. It says, now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yahushua, saying unto him, where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? Right? So they have the question, okay, we're keeping the Passover, but where should we keep it? Right? Because they've been teaching. Some people believed, others didn't, right? We know the Pharisees as a whole, they didn't really like what he was talking about, Christ or his disciples. So they were curious as to where they should keep it. It says in verse 18, he said, go into the city to such a man and say unto him, the master saith, my time is at hand, I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. right? So he's giving them instruction on who to talk to and tell them, that the time is at hand and what they're going to do as far as keeping that Passover. 19 says, and the disciples did as Yahushua had anointed them, or rather appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. So now, as you read down, it says, now when the even was come, so now we're actually in the time of the Passover. It says, at least at that year, he sat down with the 12, and as they did eat, he said, verily, verily, I say, or rather, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Remember, it hadn't happened as of yet. Verse 22, and they were exceeding sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? Right? Meaning, is it me? Am I the one that's going to betray you, Lord? Right? Because, who wants to be the one to sell out Christ, right? This is the namesake for, even though it was talking about Fred Hampton, the freedom fighter, right? Even though, he wasn't dealing with the truth, right? But he fought for the people. They called that movie what? Judas and the Messiah, right? Because it was about, the relationship was the same as far as Fred Hampton and the guy who was working as an informant, right? The guy played by, was it Lakeith Stansfield? So they call it Judas and the Messiah because the similar relationship as far as the role that Judas Iscariot would play in betraying Christ to the authorities. It says, he answered and said, he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. Right? So he put that statement out there. So, sometimes when Christ would say things, it came off as cryptic, right? It was like, I heard what he said, but I'm not sure what he means by that, right? Especially if we didn't have the understanding yet, if it didn't make sense to us. Then it says in 24, the Son of Man goeth as it is written of him. But woe unto that man who betrayeth the Son of where it says, woe or destruction unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Right? Then it says, then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said unto him, thou hast said. In other words, like, you said, right? That's what you said. Is it true? Are you the one to do it? So you only imagine, I guess, what kind of spirit was on Judas at that point, where it's like, you kind of, you know what's happening, but you don't really know what's happening until everything is kind of done. You do it, and then you come to your senses, like, oh man, like I was aware, but now it's really like hitting home, like what the heck I did, or what the heck I just said, and the ramifications for it. As you read about the story when it goes in Judas Iscariot, I was remorseful afterwards, but unfortunately, the deed had already been done, right? I see a question, I think, in the chat. I'm not sure if the person's a question. It looks like Adam Yisrael. Before we go to the next section, I'll say, sure. If you're still watching or still listening, post it. And if it's something we can answer right away, by all means. If not, then we'll definitely give you information as far as the class time. We could talk about it there too, because we have a conference line. We always entertain questions that people may have. But Adam Yisrael, if I see your post at the bottom, if you could post that question, or if you want to ask us, you can definitely do so. I'll post the number here as far as the dial-in. I'll give it a couple moments. And then if I don't get a response, then we'll try to follow up afterwards, or we'll follow up online through a direct message. Final Jeopardy.
I think we just continue. If you pose a question, we'll watch it.
Okay. Con, so let's proceed on to verse 26, but now let's do as Christ did with the disciples. Let's all get our bread together and our juice together as we read in verse 26. Con, and as we get that ready, I see your question. You said after reading Numbers 9 and 6, how can you say that you're still keeping the Passover, not bringing offerings, not being in the land? Good question. So the idea is when you read the scriptures, the Most High talks about in the lands of our captivity that we rehearse the righteous acts, right? So right now we're not in the land, right? Right now we don't have the power to say have land that we can, rear up cattle on and things like that. So what we do is we rehearse, we do it to the best of our ability. We're able to get a lamb. If we have the means to get a lamb, then we do so. A whole lamb and cook it whole like we read, awesome. We only buy a piece and we're just celebrating ourselves. We just get a small piece of lamb and prepare it that way. By all means, whatever we have the means to do. The verse I'm referring to in particular is Judges chapter 5 and verse 11, which I'll read. Judges chapter 5 and verse 11. This is a song of Deborah and Barak, but we know with our songs they were prophetic as well. This is a prophetic part of this song when you read Judges 5 and 11. And it reads, it says, they that are delivered from the noise of archers in the places of drawing water. Let's take a peek on the whole thing. So it says, they that are delivered from the noise of archers in the places of drawing water. They is referring to us. It says, that are delivered from the noise of archers. When you read the law, you read other places like in the Psalms, especially Psalms 91, it talks about the arrow that flieth by day, right? The Most High doesn't deliver us from the arrow that flieth by day and the destruction that wasteth, right? Or the destruction that comes in darkness, right? So that arrow that flieth by day, what it's actually going into, to read on, it talks about how 1,000 will fall at thy left hand and 10,000 at thy right hand. It's not so much talking about like an arrow that we have today. It's talking about an arrow, what we have now, which is like an arrow, but causes a lot more destruction and would kill thousands, which will be a missile with a nuclear warhead on the tip, typically, right? That's what you have. Like we have a poison tip arrow. Today we have modern arrows, which are missiles. That's why they made a movie about this, but it's a military term where they say a missile that you detonate, or that you launch rather, that say hits its target, but then the warhead on the tip doesn't detonate. They call it a broken arrow. They even made a movie called Broken Arrow, I think back in the 90s, right? An action movie about a missile that went to a destination, but the warhead didn't detonate. So they were trying to figure out where it was at and trying to recover it so they could use it again. So when it talks about being delivered from the noise of archers, because arrows don't make that, the regular arrows don't just make that kind of noise. It's talking about what? When missiles land and detonate and cause explosions. So it's talking about a prophecy as far as being delivered from the Third World War that's coming, right? Which is going to be, like Peter talks about, the heaven's going to pass through with a great noise, the elements shall melt with fervent heat, the works in the earth being destroyed, etc., etc. It says there, or rather, when it says places of drawing water, that's talking about what? Servitude or being in captivity, because drawing water is like something that a servant would do. They would go to a well to gather water to take back to wherever the people were dwelling at. So more or less it's talking about us that are being delivered from the destruction that's to come, from the places of our captivity. But then it says, you read on, there they shall rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord. So right now we're like in a rehearsal, right? We're not going on stage to do the actual performance, but we're rehearsing, we're practicing, right? Because right now we're in a place of drawing water, right? We're in America, we're in the Caribbean, we're in Central South America, right? We're not home. So we have to try to do these things the best we can. It says, there they shall rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts towards the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. It says, then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. So like I said, we look forward to this salvation that is to come. But for right now, in the place of drawing water where we're at, as we look to the destruction that's coming, right? That's where we try to practice to do this the best we can.
This is pretty much, I understand the context of the question, just asking why we're keeping it not in the land.
That's how I understood it. Unless I misunderstood what they're trying to ask.
And he referenced Numbers 9:6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just read just further up in that same chapter, because I think the chapter itself answers the question, right? So in Numbers chapter 9, verse 1, it says, the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. So the key was always just to keep the Passover. It wasn't specific that you was always worrying about the land. It was that you keep it at its appointed season in its proper time. So we kept the first Passover where? In Egypt, right? So now here's a year later. The second Passover is being kept where? In the wilderness, right? In its appointed season. The first time we kept it was in its appointed season that the Most High determined. The second time we kept it was in its appointed season that the Most High determined. But we kept it in two different places at that point. Once in Egypt, then in the wilderness. And then time would go on before we would even get to the Holy Land. Right? Because we was wandering around in the wilderness for how many years? 40 years. So for 40 years, we supposed to be keeping the Passover every year. And then we went and started journeying to go and take down Jericho and take down certain places before we actually occupied the land and set things up. So a lot of times, some of us in these last days get caught up on the land Israel, where we had many Passovers kept before we got into the land and after the land, because it's always supposed to be kept in its appointed season in all your dwelling places, like it tells you in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Wherever you're dwelling, that's where you're supposed to remember and keep those precepts.
So the question is, why are we not keeping it in Israel?
Yeah, that's what you put in the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He said thanks, or he or she said thanks, but I think what you guys are answering, I think, might be more to what they're asking. Because then I see Zaquan Malak, he posted Numbers 9:11 about the 14th day of the second month. And then he referred to what you just said, Exodus 12:14, about keeping it throughout our generations as a feast, regardless of where that we keep it.
I mean, the scriptures are clear. The Most High pretty much they give you specifics of this law, how it should be kept. Because it's very important to him that we keep that wherever we may be. But for some reason, sometimes when it comes to the law, the Most High seems difficult, even though the Most High makes it clear.
And I'll post Judges 5:11 too, just as a reference. But yeah, that's a verse, a go-to verse we have to go to a lot, just to show that no matter where we're at, we want to rehearse those righteous acts.
Yeah, why when it comes to this?
No, it's funny because we've had this question before, right? I can remember someone that actually pushed back on this, but unfortunately, they weren't coming from a righteous place. I think they're just looking for a way around trying to keep it, sadly. Oh, oops. So what elder for posting that verse? But to our question, hopefully we answered that. Let's continue on with Matthew 26 if there's no further questions, Your Honor. Exodus 12 and 14. So now back in Matthew 26. So now the scenario is what? Christ with his 12 disciples. They're in the first night of the Passover, just like we're writing right now. He told them about what? Somebody is going to what? Betray him. Someone's going to betray him, right? And even Judas Iscariot himself asked if he's the one. And Christ said, "Thou sayest," right? Him already knowing, right? But now Matthew 26. Let's read in verse 26 now. Just say come once we're all back there. All right, so now Matthew 26 and 26, it says, "And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.'" So now this is symbolic of Christ's body. He's not talking about cannibalism. I've heard certain gainsayers try to say that, and Christ is making this reference. But he's talking about this representing the body or his body, because we're only here because he offered his body for our sakes, because of our sin. So now if you have your matzah at home, or if you made your unleavened bread by hand, by all means, let's partake of the body of Christ symbolically.
Oh, you eat it?
So,
No, because we usually bless it.
okay. So, Yahweh got a wall by Hashem, Adonai Yahweh Shai, Baruch Shai, Barak, Lachamya, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Thawada Aman. Then it says in verse 27, "And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, 'Drink, eat all of it. This is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins.'" So now, if you have your yayin or wine or your grape juice, right, we would now partake of this, where Christ says, "Drink." And of course, if you're taking Nazarite vow, obviously take that into account. But if not, then we're going to partake in this as far as drinking. Remember, we're not talking about drinking blood. We know the blood represents the life. We have everlasting life through Christ, so it's symbolic of his blood. Not that we're drinking blood, we're drinking the wine, which is representative of Christ's life that now we have through his sacrifice. So now I'll bless this. So Yahweh got a wall by Hashem, Adonai Yahweh Shai, Baruch Shai, Barak, Yayanya, or Yayanya Nawa by Hashem Yahweh Shai, Thawada Aman. What's going on? Why are you looking? But now, here's a little treat, because when Christ was with his disciples, right, here's what he told them in verse 29. Christ says, "But I say unto you I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Right? It's like you said, the kingdom mind state. Right? We keep that mind state with the what's the word I want? The anticipation, right? Of we walk in Christ here and now as if He was here until the day He actually comes to where in the kingdom, where we may be, hopefully we're part of that 1/3. Who knows? We might be part of that 12 disciples, right? We don't know who we may be in the kingdom. We can sit down with Him and then He'll drink wine with us, right? And then as He does it, we all can smile upon it and go, that's prophecy is now fulfilled. Because there's still more prophecies in this Bible need to be fulfilled. This is one that still hasn't been fulfilled yet, right? What we just read in verse 29. So I can see all the brothers and sisters there, right? When Christ takes that sip of wine in the kingdom, it'll be a joyous occasion, right? It'll be a happy occasion. They'll say, yeah, our Lord and Savior said He would do that with us in the kingdom, and here we are in the kingdom, and now He's partaking in that wine. Come. So now we can go back to Exodus 12. Because it tells us what? We saw something else that we partook in as well when we left out of Egypt, right? So Exodus chapter 12, and let's go to verse 8. Like I said, for folks watching online, if you have horseradish, right? We have some horseradish here that we're going to partake in, right? Which is pretty bitter, right? Feels like it's clears out your sinuses when you consume it. What we're supposed to be reminded of when we partake of the bitter herb is the hard bonds we were made to serve throughout our captivity in Egypt. You can even reflect on it now as far as the hard bonds that we serve in the modern day Egypt called America, right? But this is Exodus 12, and I'm going to read verse 8. But yeah, like I said, if the horseradish is a bit much, especially for the younger folk, you can partake in romaine lettuce. Use that as a bitter herb. So Exodus 12 and 8, it says, and they shall eat the flesh in that night roast with fire, right? So that's where to partake in finally, which is the lamb. It says, and unleavened bread, which we partook in, which was the same bread that Christ broke with His disciples. Then it says, and the bitter herbs, they shall eat it. So it's a slice of the horseradish. So now we're going to partake in the bitter herbs. So praise the Most High, and thank you for preserving us through this hard bondage we've been made to serve. Here it comes. Takes a while for it to build up, so. That's right, sister. I feel it too. Woo! Someone got a good batch. Woo! Fresh.
You all right, brother?
He don't like that.
This is different.
He said,
Woo! You got that right.
affliction.
So yes, burning the bitter herbs will represent our bondage that we face even this day in modern America, the modern Egypt or America, at the hands of our oppressors. So let us be a reminder of us to walk that straight and narrow path, get ourselves right, and help the rest of Israel get right so that we're ready when Christ makes a second coming. We say we're waiting on Christ, but really, Christ or Yahweh is waiting on us to get it right. So let's get it right, y'all. Till kingdom come. Let's get it right. Let's help our brothers and sisters get it right. Okay. So if no one else has any other scriptures they want to share, either in the chat or here in person or over teleconference, we'll say Ashar Chag Matazawaf, as well as Ashar Pasach. Ashar Pasach meaning Happy Passover, while Ashar Chag Matazawaf, which means Happy Feast of Unleavened Bread. So, Shalom Yasharallah.
Shabbat.
The water for joining us either in person, online, or over the phone. And then with that, we'll do the closing prayers. Definitely enjoy the rest of your day. Remember that throughout this week, to not partake of anything that has leaven. If you've already checked your house, great. If not, if you're just finding out about it now, still go through your house today, right? Tonight, going into the morning, and however long it takes, and get all the leaven out of your house, right? Everything has leaven in it. If you haven't done so already. And we're going to reconvene again the 1st of May at sundown, right? After sundown. That's going to be the 7th day. So remember with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it's always the day before. So like Feast of Tabernacles is always the same day of the week because we come together on the 1st and the 8th day of the month. But this is the 1st and the 7th day of the month. So like tonight we come together on a Sunday. When we close or do the closing service, we're going to come together this upcoming Saturday at sundown. We're going to have the closing feast that day. And then the feast will officially end. We can eat leaven again Sunday, sundown, which is the 2nd of May. So our feast day is like tonight, Sunday, but then the closing feast is going to be this upcoming Saturday or May 1st, Sunday. But just keep an eye out for the group text because I'll just send out reminders that people know. All right, so once again, Sharp Pasach wa Chag Matazawaf. That will do the closing prayers. Stay in the spirit, y'all. Watch and pray. It was rather potent, I must say. Whew. Barak Yehovah, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Tanana, Parya Gapin, Tuara Aman. La Yehovah, Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Yasher Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you so good. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. At Madwa, Panyua Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aithad, Yamyan, Aithad, Shalak, Ma'aka Allah, Waha Allahayim, Tazwadakiam, La, Shmar Ayel, Barak, Rapah, Magan, Wachazayak, Banya, Yasharala, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Rabiam, Da'aith, Rabiam, Bayanad, Rabiam, Samalanwa, Rabiam, Amawan, Rabiam, Aqua, Rabiam, Ahabiam, Rabiam, Haganah, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Kal, Katayamnawa, La Akim, Wa Aqua, Wayasha'ala, Thumyad, Waiwalam, Bahasham, Yahawashai, Tawada, Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wiyasha'ala, Wabathya Saparium, Shema, Yasharala, Yahweh, Allah, Yahweh, Echad. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Let me do the prayer for the food. Yahweh, Garawo, Ba'Shem, Arawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Barak, Makal, Yanawa, Shatayawak, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lacham, Yanawa, Shakara, Yanawa, Zakhak, Pasach, Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Tuwada, Aman. All right, so with that, we'll say, Sharp Pasach, Wakak Matazawav. Have a blessed day, first day of the feast. Most of us will be talking to you guys throughout the classes this week during the feast. Shalom, Yashra, Walay Allah to well.